When it comes to seasonal anime, I generally only watch the first 2 or 3 episodes of what's airing in order to scope out what I think will be worth my time once they've finished airing, since I'm one of those few anime fans who likes to binge watch his shows as opposed to the more popular weekly viewing that the majority of anime fans engage in. Also, people like me happen to be a minority not only within the anime community as a whole, but among most anime YouTubers. Another thing I should mention is that I'm not really much of a manga reader. The only manga I can say I've read in my entire life are the first 3 volumes of Claymore, the entirety of Ghost of the Shell, and I'm still catching up on Berserk since it doesn't look like we'll be getting a good anime adaptation like we did with the 90s version or even the Golden Age movies anytime soon. With that being said, yes, since I like to keep up to date news-wise with seasonal or upcoming seasonal anime on social media, I was fully aware at just how much the Ancient Magus Bride was being advertised, not only by the studio that produced the show, but by every anime-related streaming service, licensing service, magazine publication, and every other outlet that promotes geek media. So, despite its aggressive marketing campaign, and because I don't read manga or keep up with the print side of the anime industry, I can't say I gave in or was sold on all the hype surrounding the show or any show that has been hyped before it. Another reason could also be because nobody in my circle of friends who watch anime ever brought it up in conversation, and also when it comes to my circle of friends that are located here in my country, most of them aren't into anything anime related or are just very casual fans of the medium. However, a few weeks before the air date of this show, several anime YouTubers made videos or hosted podcasts recommending and discussing what shows viewers should check out during the winter 2017/2018 season, and this show was on practically everybody's list, even among the more cynical and controversial of anime YouTubers. So I went and checked out the 3-episode OVA, and the next thing I knew, I was instantly sold on checking this show out after the wonderful experience it provided, and couldn't wait for the first couple of episodes to air. Firstly, before I discuss the main series, the 3 OVA episodes, while definitely different in tone and feel to the main story in a very subtle way, still manages to capture the magical and absolutely wondrous atmosphere of the main story from both a visual standpoint and its darker undertones when it comes to the plot. For those of you who have yet to check this show and the OVA out, the OVA is basically a prequel of sorts to the events of the main story that flesh out the backstory of the protagonist without giving away too much as to what makes her so special or what leads to the situation she finds herself in at the beginning of the first episode. While I personally wasn't disappointed or put off from diving into the main show while watching the OVA, a lot of manga fans seem to believe that the prequel only makes sense or can really be appreciated once you know a little more about the actual story, according to what I've read on some of the My Anime List and Reddit forums. So the decision lies with you whether or not you want to watch the OVA first or at a later stage. Now we get to the main story. The Ancient Magus Bride tells the story of a teenage girl named Hatori Chise, who is born with a strange ability to see strange magical creatures and entities that most everyday humans cannot, and for some reason they are always drawn to her wherever she goes. And this ability leads to her being shunned by those who surround her as a person who is disturbed and brings misfortune wherever she goes, and after her mother's tragic death is left abandoned and moving from family to family, all of whom abandon her sooner or later. So she eventually decides to sell herself off as a slave in the hope that she will either be of some use to somebody or perhaps have a place where she feels like she belongs. She is then bought by a mysterious mage named Elias, who takes her on as his apprentice, to which he later reveals that he also intends to make her his bride. Now, the synopsis alone should tell you that the story is going to deal with a lot of dark subject matter that might leave some sensitive people feeling a little uncomfortable. But the story doesn't present itself as something that is edgy and over the top and that does dark shit for the sake of being cool or something like that. If anything, the show actually handles its darker themes quite well, and in some instances, episode 3 in particular, the show actually manages to bring out a more positive and hopeful way of thinking about a theme as morbid as mortality and death. So it's definitely something worth checking out before jumping to any conclusions. The real question I I found myself asking with each episode that I watched was, could this show possibly be the next big modern classic? And if so, just what is it about this show that could potentially make it so? Sure, shows like Attack on Titan, One Punch Man, My Hero Academia, and Mob Psycho 100 can definitely be thrown into this category along with a plethora of other well-received titles that have been released in recent years, but from my personal experience, I cannot remember a show that last had me asking this question since Steins Gate, which despite airing all the way back in 2011, still gets talked about a lot today and is even getting a sequel series sometime this year. So what exactly is it that's got everyone, myself included, so absorbed and entranced by this show and had many anime fans hyping it up when the adaptation was announced back in 2016? Well, let's start with the characters. From what we've seen so far, almost every character that has been introduced is very complex and has many layers to their motivations, intentions, goals, and personalities. None of them seem to be presented in a typical black and white fashion, and they all seem to react and respond differently whenever they interact with Chisei or Elias. And some characters happen to already be aware of what Chisei really is, which I won't give away for those who aren't caught up with the show or manga, even if they've only met her for the first time. Some of the characters only seem to be friends with Elias for either the services he provides or the magical items he seems to have acquired during his time as a mage, which makes every interaction feel like you're watching real people. Also, some of them seem to have a lot more interest in Chisei than what any normal person would have after a first meeting, especially considering when it's revealed just how rare and special a kind of person she is and the abilities she possesses when it comes to the world of magic. It is this kind of writing that really leaves you guessing which of the characters can be trusted as genuine allies of Elias and Chisei, or enemies using them and the situations that they find themselves in for their own means. It even leaves you wondering whether Elias himself cannot all be trusted, sometimes with regards to his motivations involving Chisei. Granted, it's no grand thriller or mystery story, and it's not meant to be, but anyone who, like me, isn't caught up with the manga, or has the uncanny ability to predict what exactly will happen with the characters and the plot, can at least enjoy well-crafted characters that are likable and feel as though they really exist in our world. Now, I have been watching the series in the English dub, and no, I don't give a damn about the whole sub versus dub argument because I like both, and I think the entire debate, though I could accurately describe it as a war if I so wanted to, as a whole is just plain dumb. Anyways, the reason I decided to check out the dub was not necessarily because of the casting, although admittedly it did play a small role in the decision, but because of the setting of the show. It would be rather weird to watch a show that takes place in England and other areas of Europe and everybody is all of a sudden a fluent Japanese speaker, now wouldn't it? I'm guessing that because of the massive hype surrounding this show, Funimation really decided to get their A game on when it came to choosing the casting for their dub, like they did with the dub for My Hero Academia. And yes, My Hero Academia takes place in Japan, but while I've watched both the sub and the dub, I just prefer the sound of the dub in the case of that show. Anyways, each voice actor showcases a lot of different aspects to their respective characters and their personalities, and so far I've yet to come across a single character in these first few episodes whose voice didn't match the kind of character being portrayed. Also, the amount of effort that each actor puts into their roles only adds to the immersion from an audio perspective and really allows the viewer to give their undivided attention to the wonderful and breathtaking art and animation. This show, along with Made in Abyss and a few other shows, definitely has some of the most top-notch visuals that I have seen in any anime released last year. The bright and vibrant color palette, which is accompanied by stunning background art, beautiful character and creature designs, smooth animation, and superb lighting that makes use of many fantastic camera angles and shots that, if paused, can be used as desktop wallpapers or reference for drawing. Also, the effects blend in really well with the rest of the animation and complement the colors and lighting as well. Never before have the visuals and atmosphere of a modern anime telling a traditional fantasy story given me a nostalgic sensation similar to some of my all-time favorite fantasy anime like Berserk, Record of Lodoss War, and of course, Spice and Wolf. Every scene complements the score of the show really well, and it just creates a magical and wondrous atmosphere that really pulled me into the world and made me feel as though I were right there with the characters and interacting with them. And in the scenes that take place in larger, more open areas, literally make the world that the characters inhabit feel alive. And it would sometimes make me feel like I wanted to explore all the little details of that particular area, like I would in a game like Skyrim. One thing I can say for certain is that while I may not have read the manga, even I can tell that the author of the series made sure to pay attention to every little aspect of this world and give a feeling that it could actually exist within our own, and that maybe we're just not as aware of it like we once were. Also, the way that everything is presented, from the way the characters interact with the world, creatures, and other characters, really make this more traditional take on fantasy feel fresh and new instead of cliched and predictable. While watching this series, I could immediately feel the love the author has for European mythology and fantasy. All the creatures that inhabit the world of the Ancient Magus Bride don't feel like typical reimaginings of them by taking only certain aspects of the lore that were appealing and then portraying them in a different light to what was originally established. This is something that isn't seen very often in fantasy fiction nowadays. But all I can say is that I'm glad that the author stuck more or less with the original lore and presented it in such a way that almost makes it feel as though you are revisiting something that just makes you feel as though you are reconnecting with something that perhaps once upon a time filled your heart and mind with wonder and amazement. The Ancient Magus Bride has definitely had a strong start so far, both narratively and visually, and it already looks like it could not only be the best show of 2017, but possibly one of the all-time great classics. This show is slated to have 24 episodes in total, and it will apparently cover a fairly good portion of the manga. I just hope that it will get a second season, and technically it should, considering how popular it is not only in the West, but in its native Japan as well. But knowing the current way the anime industry works, we'll just have to wait and see whether we'll get the now common to be continued ending or an anime original ending that could either make or break the show as a whole. Another thing I should bring up is the pacing. It's actually handled quite nicely and doesn't really feel as though it's going by too quickly or too slowly. There are even moments in the pacing where it kind of takes little breathers in between scenes, where it just allows you to soak in and absorb the show's atmosphere by letting the viewer get a good look at every shot of the splendorous natural scenery or the cozy and comforting elements of the various old-fashioned English houses, the historical nostalgia of London, and the many other cities located in England through all the landmarks and shops. The pacing definitely complements the visuals nicely and really makes each episode feel like you've been on an amazing journey of the senses, and that is really saying something. Finally, I want to talk about the score. The score for the Ancient Magus Bride is nothing short of amazing and really enhances the experience of both the story itself and the visual elements of the show, which is really saying something since the composer is apparently a newcomer to the industry. Each track manages to capture the mood of every scene and really helps to immerse the viewer into the world itself. It also really sells the wondrous and vibrant vibe each episode brings and really pulls you in from the opening credits to the ending credits. Also, the opening theme is pretty dope. I personally don't find the ending theme anything particularly special, but that could change as I continue to watch it, as I've had songs grow on me in the past. So, if you're getting sick and tired of drowning in the endless sea of modern isekai or VR video game style fantasy anime with harem tropes aplenty, and have a yearning to return to fantasy anime rooted in traditional real-world mythology with a less fan servicey plot, then this is the show for you. A similar show I would recommend checking out would have to be Spice and Wolf, because even though it doesn't take place in our modern world, its setting and characters give off that same feeling that at some point in our history, magical and mythological beings perhaps once lived beside or among us, and maybe, just maybe, they still do. So, what do you guys think of the Ancient Magus Bride so far? Feel free to let me know in the comments below. Also be sure to subscribe to the channel if you are new here and want to see more great content. And be sure to give the video a like before sharing it with your friends. You can also help me out by donating to my Patreon to keep my channels going and have access to some of the awesome reward tiers that are available. You can also follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, and all those other lovely places that will be linked in the description box below. Finally, be sure to check out my list of what I personally believe to be the top 10 anime of 2017, or if you're a music lover, you can also check out my list of the top 10 metal albums of 2017 for some new jams. Thank you for watching, and until next time, take care of yourselves, and as always, have a kick-ass day.